Jonas Shapala will be presenting about Epic Stormwater Management System. We have these systems in our Carson City Maintenance Chart right here behind us, and also on SR28. Without further ado, Jonas.
Okay. Thank you, Z, and thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here among other peers. To get started, back in the late 60s, when the astronauts started the race program with the Russians, John Glenn and the other astronauts, when they were in zero gravity, found out that the ballpoint pens didn't work. NASA was really upset. They spent several $1 million and the years of research to invent what they call a space pen. But during all that time, the Russians were simply using a pencil. So the whole moral of the story, the world we live in water management does not have to be as complex as the space pen. There are simple solutions for the goals we want to attain. Evaporative Control Systems is a Reno company. Since 1999 worldwide, we've installed over 200 plus installations. We were used and vetted and researched by 3 universities, New Mexico State, UNR, UC Davis. We have been used and approved by major municipalities like Minneapolis, City of Los Angeles, other small communities, Santa Barbara, Marin County, whatever. Yountville, Department of Defense has used our project. Army Corps of Engineers has vetted and approved us.
But we can't tell you where that one's located.
Yeah, we can't tell you on that one. At the same time, major corporations, Walmart, Firestone, Harley-Davidson for your motorcycles have used it on their projects. The ASLA, American Society, has given us awards on 2 of the projects. And in 2011, we won the technology won the prestigious award of the most innovative water management product by H2O magazine in 2011. So the moral of the story is, yes, we're small, we're new, but we're not here to sell you snake oil. And we're not here to use you as guinea pigs on future projects you may have. The technology has been around and is well thought out of and proven.
Jonas got the patent in 1999, and it was developed here locally in the northern Nevada area and researched here in Nevada.
So anyway, EPIC has many applications. In a short elevator speech, it's really a tool where the user can manage water movement underground in 3 dimensions, laterally, horizontally, vertically, all done by basic physics and gravity. That's the tool. It has many applications. Today's presentation is going to focus on road filtration aspects, on why we want to apply this technology in that particular field. And I'll leave it up to Tom.
Well, and if we look at the history and anatomy of the road, there's the paved surface is not new. It's been around since 1893. That was the first paved road in Ohio. Lane markings was actually come up with Edward Hines in 1911 in Detroit, Michigan. Rumble strips from New Jersey, 1952. Wider rolled shoulders for safety purposes from Ireland and onto the United States in the 70s and the 80s. But when we think about the anatomy of the road when a storm event takes place, what we really are taking place is prior to 1st century drainage dynamics and physics. We're essentially just sloping the road off to the side. And I say prior to 1st century because there are evidence of Roman roads, so like this one in Turkey, that still exist, that have ditches on the side of the road, and we are simply shedding and sloping that water away. We're holding an umbrella over our heads and shedding water away. Our concept we're going to portray to you today is the idea of how we can be able to turn that umbrella upside down and capture and reuse that water for more efficient use. So the erosive nature of water, this is the beginning of erosion that takes place from the side of the road. How many people here in their wet weather plans spec straw wattles? Show of hands. Kind of common in the plans. But as you can see, there is some damage that can occur and some buildup of different flood events. You have water that goes around each wattle. Jonas, you took this picture up off around Tahoe?
Yeah, one example of that is a straw wattle will not control volumetric buildup. So a straw wattle that passes the next one increases in volume. So in this particular one, a damming occurred, water built up, the water went around the dam, started erosion, but now you had a surge that actually eroded more material than if there was no straw wattle. You really worsened the situation, otherwise you would have just maybe had a deeper trench or furrow down the middle. So it's not a magic solution.
Well, it's a maintenance headache. You have lots of erosion buildup. As you all know, sediment is a big contribution to erosion buildup. You have lots of wear along the road base. And it's really a lost resource. So what we were speaking with Jason King, with the state water engineer, is that there is a feasibility that the water captured on the roadways could be actually a new resource. There was a study done in Colorado where they found that 97% of the water that hits the waterways is either lost to evaporation or to native plant growth. So only 3% makes it to watersheds. So why are we wasting this water resource when we could be able to utilize it and not lose it to evaporation? Another aspect is the safety issue of ditches. This is a little video that we got from Florida. Some of you may have saw that on Facebook, but ditches love cars. I know our videographer Brian was in a roller accident in his teenage years, so he made sure to reassure that we wore our seatbelts on the way here today, which you all should at all times. But it's this water management that becomes a public safety issue. Is there an alternative to ditches that we can be able to utilize? And that's what we hope to be able to present to you today, that there can be, in fact, an alternative. I mean, there are maintenance improvements and cost improvements that we have by maintaining these ditches, but is that really saving money? Is that really saving lives? You can see when you don't have a ditch and some of the erosion that takes place, the subtle effects of a soft shoulder slowly starting to erode away, which especially after this winter can be able to increase dramatically. This is near my cousin's house up in Washington State, where the entire hillside is essentially flooding away. And what we did when we looked at the pictures closely is we did find some of our engineering technology that was being utilized for the drainage that essentially failed, and Jonas is going to elaborate.
Yeah, in the late 60s, we started using 10-foot pipes with half-inch holes. It's still around as a plastic. In the 70s, we found out that these kind of plugged, so they went with a slitted pipe, a smaller hole, more holes, and we thought that would work. But when you work in soils, especially in a sand environment, simply surrounding gravel or stone around that pipe, when you introduce a sand procedure, it really pachinkos right into the pipe. Now, we knew that in the Middle Ages. That's why we invented the hourglass. A very small constriction will still allow sand to flow at an even rate you can set your watch on. The problem with sand, and sand is just a particle in soil, is when it's totally saturated, it acts like a liquid. When it's totally dry, it acts like a liquid and it pours. The only time it doesn't act like a liquid when it's just damp.
Now, how many people spec perforated pipe in their plans?
Right.
That's pretty common too, right? And yet, still a falter technology.
Now, to resolve that in the 80s and 10, 15 years ago, they said, well, let's wrap the pipe in geo-fabric, and that's what they did, and you can still buy that today. But what we're doing then, we're simply making a smaller opening over already a small opening. It's very similar to your coffee filter. Try running it 3 days without filtration, and the water is going to overflow. And this is what happens. The pipe then plugs on the outside, and the water never gets into the pipe. So you may install millions of miles of this, but it has no functionality because when it rains, nothing comes out the other side. To demonstrate that, I even took rock, small rock, just the clay material on top of that rock. If you run water through the filter, this is what the geo-fabric holds up. 4 pounds of rock gives you a 1/4-inch layer of clay on a geo-fabric. And this stops water movement altogether. And I can pass this around.
So how many people are speccing geofabrics in their plans? Most likely for porosity reasons, but eventually they do clog up, they do become a liner eventually, and that's essentially what we're portraying. So the other aspects of water management that take place, if we aren't controlling the water movement from the sides of the roads, especially with snowbanks, it can be able to build up and become a safety hazard as it comes across the road. The snow melt can freeze overnight in these spring temperatures. So the goal of public safety is really part of what we're portraying. This accident that occurred, was it caused by ice, slush, driver error? Was he texting? You know, we don't know. But you know, if some of the water on the roadway contributed to that accident, that's something we as engineers can be able to help alleviate and fix for future generations as we design the roads of the future. And you go into urban areas, it's an expensive infrastructure. You require large pipe, deep trenches have to be able to be dug. Hemet, California, for example, paid over $4 million to extend their drainage capacity for 1 mile. The answer has always been to move water. We have to build bigger movement apparatuses to move more water away, build a bigger umbrella. For that $4 million, we could have done for 25% that cost, we could have made all those trees in that slide completely sustainable from the roadway stormwater management. So there's different aspects of what we're trying to portray is that there's different ways, instead of the space pen, that we can be able to manage our water instead of move our water. Some of the management techniques that we're currently using is curb and gutter. As you know, some of those costs can be up as low as $4 for just the curb. If you go to curb and gutter systems, upwards of $30. I mean, you folks can probably tell me the price is better. I've heard up to $55 a linear foot for curb and gutter, depending on the applications. This is what I call the conventional catch basin blues. There's unprotected, then they're blocked by debris. If we protect them, we may bypass them with a straw wattle. So, why are we building these in the first place? It's really an attempt at filtration, I suppose, if we're trying to have a cultural message by painting, drains to the ocean, drains to the watershed. And we have the physical attempts of filtration, too. That geo-fabric most likely was completely ripped apart from the very first storm that it encountered. But the destination ultimately is finally reached, and these are the type of contaminants that are reaching our systems. And there's different filters that exist now. You see the catch basin bags. What we have is a type of filter that we're going to show you that we feel is a self-cleaning and a longer duration, a longer lifespan, and better for the money. But you can be able to see all the contaminants that reach that destination. Sediment, of course, being the biggest contribution, but it also can be a wildlife hazard as well, too. The family of ducks can lose their use. How many times do you see a kitten that they rescue from the storm drain? These eagles just this last year in Florida, I know it pulls on the heartstrings a little bit, but there are benefits to animal wildlife and habitats and storm drains as well too. So I guess they're serving more of a purpose than just moving water. They're becoming a conduit system for these different travelers. But we can, I think, really agree that we are miscalculating some of our stormwater events. In this case...
this was an interesting event. In order to prevent soil erosion, we used a lot of straw covering over the hillside. But when the rain event came, a lot of the straw floated over and actually started converging and filtering that drainage grate. And that built up the lake behind it, and then it added enough pressure to break out the entire levee system.
So the erosion control caused the problem.
Caused the problem in the event.
Even as we zero-scape, to try to save and conserve water, the water movement still goes underneath the rocks, and really the biggest pollutant problem is the total suspended solids, the TSS. That brown muddy water is what will pretty much bypass all of our hydrodynamic separators. A lot of the filters that we have in place to control sediment does not address TSS.
And this is where phosphates reside. Phosphates are a positive charged additive. They cling on to the clay, so they're carriers. So if you have brown water, you have phosphate movement. Unlike nitrates, negatively charged, moves in a different pattern.
How many people have soil tests and have to check percolation rates for their plants? Just about everybody, right? Well, those percolation rates, as you know, can change over the course of time. Even though we designed these storm detention ponds to be able to percolate and get rid of that excess storm water, the first incursion of muddy, silted water is going to clog up those detention basins similar to the basin of a river or a lake. So that clean, pristine snow that was draining into this then becomes the coffee silt that we see, and there's really no perceived value to the client. It's a waste of real estate. We usually have to fence off these areas for safety. It then becomes difficult access for maintenance to even come in and dredge out those sediments. You have standing water that's then an exposure for the disease-spreading West Nile virus, mosquitoes, a haven for geese. But most importantly, for the money for the client, you're wasting real estate. That could be a few more houses or a Starbucks or some more parking in the urban area. And that's part of what we accomplished with SR28 is that we're able to utilize stormwater management.
And even silt fences, look at the erosion above it and then below the silt fence. Did it really do anything? It's really not a ground infiltration mechanism. Right now, look at Lemon Valley. Why isn't it infiltrating and recharging groundwater sources? No, it's just a big lake that's waiting for evaporation to occur. Because the mud, the silt, the clays even a small layer as narrow as a millimeter is going to be enough of a barrier like plastic to prevent groundwater infiltration. That's just the nature of physics. So the porosity isn't there when we're dealing with clay situations.
It's a similar aspect to that geo-fabric that we passed around. You saw how caked that clay was on top.
Yeah. Now, an interesting article came out in January in the Stormwater magazine, and what caught my eye is it's as pure as snow. Well, snow isn't as pure as snow. Look at this winter event we had. Go anywhere along the road, you start seeing blacker and blacker snow. So what is this material? This is Lake Tahoe in 2016. We actually went out and we took some of these black snowballs and we melted it down. And what we found out, eventually the melt occurs, your exit points are all going to go to the lake. So the best BMPs we're doing now, this is a melted snowball. This is what's going into Lake Tahoe right now with the best BMPs you have out there. And I'll pass this around. And what is curious about this slide is look at this. After 1 week, this black material doesn't even settle out. It just stays in suspension. So I was wondering, why is it black and why is it in suspension? Because what I filtered out was only 4% of the material. The filtrate was really sand-like, asphalt bits, sand-like bits. This is a 1 millimeter spacing. But you see these small particles, and these are tire bits. They're in a vaporized form. Now, if this pile was in Sand Harbor, all hell would break loose and be all over the newspaper. But in reality, this pile doesn't really do much. It doesn't decompose. It has a hazard of breeding probably 1 billion mosquitoes once the water settles in the tire, but it's not an erosive factor. Now, I took a tire, same size, same everything, new it was 30 pounds, used it was 29. So a tire over 50,000 miles, I lose 3.36 pounds per tire. I have 4 tires on a car, so it's over 50,000 miles. It's a minuscule amount, but once you have 100,000 cars, it's 6.72 pounds of tire bits that are worn on the road. And how much is 100,000 cars per year? It's 274 cars per day, 11 cars per hour.
When we were driving to Lake Tahoe, there's an accident, and we got stuck for a while, and we counted pretty close to 274 cars right there in that minute. So there's obviously more cars than 100,000 cars a year. You guys could probably tell us. I mean, how many cars drive around Lake Tahoe? It's by the millions. And so these tire bits, this tire wear is something that's going unchecked and draining into our current stormwater watersheds and into Lake Tahoe. That bottle that we're passing around is what we're currently shedding in, and we can be able to filter that. We can be able to clean that up. So if you analyze carbon black, what's the consistency?
Analyze it, there's a lot of stuff. So what caused my eyes, 4.5% of zinc. I don't know what the value is. The heavy metals people are concerned of. Arsenic is less than 1 part per million. Is it 900 parts per billion? I don't know. Do I really care? Maybe. Cadmium.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Let me go back for you here. There you go.
Cadmium, again, a small amount. Oh, lead is a little more. It shows up at 69 parts per million. Well, it doesn't meet drinking water standards. I know that. What do we do with it? What are we going to do with it?
But more interestingly is some of the higher.
You look at other ones, is you're looking at calcium, 9,000. Keep on clicking, yeah. Magnesium, phosphorus, potassium. All of a sudden, carbon black gives me 5 of the nutrients that plants like. So I already have a nutritional solution that is going to cause some type of eutrophication. So if it's a small body of water, this is what starts inducing algae growth and plankton growth, and because it's a fertilizer aspect. Is it a crisis? I don't know. Some people call it a crisis. Some people don't call it a crisis. I'm just looking at reality, and you take over.
Well, and really, we like to say that there is no water crisis. We just needed to look at the way that we're managing our water sources differently, and that's where the EPIC system comes into play. I mean, a lot of this eutrophication and algae blooms in Tahoe Keys and in some of our lakes is really could not just be a cause of just fertilizer runoff for lawns. It could also be, as we demonstrated, a cause from the tire wear that's coming off our roads. And so this is just a brief video that you can be able to show colleagues that's from our website that demonstrates what the EPIC system
is. A
is.
non-pressurized, passive, subsurface irrigation, drainage, water collection, and filtration system that can be installed in nearly any landscape for efficient irrigation and stormwater management. Runoff from adjoining hard surfaces is directed to the vegetative layer. Below the vegetation is a porous sand profile that filters suspended solids while promoting exceptional root growth. Beneath the sand is a thin layer of fine gravel that quickly spreads water evenly on top of the EPDM geomembrane that resides under the gravel. On top of the geomembrane is a network of EPIC chambers, whose function is to collect and distribute water throughout the interconnected system evenly, without clogging. As the water moves downward through the sand, into the fine gravel, and through the gravity trap, into the EPIC chamber. When stormwater or surface runoff drains to the system, the sand profile immediately initiates filtration. The chamber and connector pipes distribute the water evenly throughout the system and retain a designed amount of water for irrigation reuse. Excess water can be transferred to a secondary containment, below or above ground reservoirs, or discharged directly out of the system at a designated location. When water is introduced into the chamber for irrigation, the chamber uses head pressure to inject water into the sand profile, which then initiates an upward capillary rise action into the root zone. This highly aerobic zone is exceptional for promoting root growth and simultaneously functions as a biofilter. The EPIC system brings together passive irrigation, water storage, and filtration into a single, customizable, low-maintenance solution.
So what Jonas has invented is an apparatus that will not clog in subsurface profiles, in sand profiles, in gravel profiles, whether you use gravel for your drainage filtration or sand for passive irrigation.
So the basic, this is the EPIC chamber. It's equal on both sides. This is a rib of the EPIC chamber. This is a cutaway view, so when you look at the rib, this is a halfway area like that. Now, at the bottom we have gravel. It could be all gravel in case of road filtration. It could be fine sand. It could be coarse sand. It could be corn. It's just an aggregate that has a certain flow rate and a certain capillary rise rate. The nice part about it is even if when you use sand, sand is not hydrophobic, so even a little bit of water spreads out and gets absorbed by the sand right away. If you have dirty water, it really gets settled within a ½ inch of the sand profile. Even clay cannot penetrate a fine sand material because it doesn't do anything.
So the filter captures at the surface where it's easily maintainable. You don't have to dig these profiles up. You could just simply treat the surface for maintenance.
Right, so if you have a filtration event, it simply goes down, finds the gravel, flows horizontally, goes through this gravity trap, and then into the unit. If I'm using it for irrigation or retain the water that I've just captured, water fills again by gravity very slowly in a chamber, but before it exits the pipe on the other end through the 2-inch portal, it has to overfill that inner hole, as you see it happening now. When that happens, it spreads out horizontally very quickly, and then the water intersects the sand profile. When that happens, capillary physics takes over, and the sand starts to move, the water starts to move upward, as you can see it in the rise. Now, in most United States sands, this upward capillary rise is about peters out at 12 inches. When we were in Dubai, the fine dune sand actually capillarized 24 inches, so it has a higher profile because it was a finer, rounder sand. So every sand has a unique fingerprint on how fast it rises and how fast it drains. Once the water is in a profile and spreads out, the profile actually holds 2.5 gallons of water per square foot. It becomes like a giant sponge. You can drive on it, you can walk on it. It's not quicksand. The quicksand portion is way below for a 3-inch level. And if it rains, excess drains. If you're out, capillarizes up. So most sands that we use have a drainage capacity of 1 inch per 10 minutes. If we grow grass, the capacity decreases because of root structure, then we have a capacity of 1 inch per hour. But I can still keep up with, when we do athletic fields, 23 inches of rain in 24 hours, and the car can come out and drive on the field in 5 minutes.
Similar to a car driving at the beach at low tide.
Right. It has that consistency and firming. So the three, go ahead.
Well, actually, everyone got a chance to see the tire bottle, right? Now, here's the bottle that we've filtered through the Epic Sand Profile. So just like washed sand is used to filter our drinking water, we're applying that to landscapes and road filtration. So the components of the system, EPIC is not just fun to say, it's actually an acronym for Environmentally Passive Integrated Conveyance. We have a conveyance that can reliably be able to move water three-dimensionally subsurface without clogging, and that's the chamber. Then you'll have some kind of water barrier to be able to prevent the water from being lost into the ground table, so then you can be able to reuse it for biological plants. So together they make what we call an EPIC cell. And these are all installed on laser level planes and then connect together, similar to biology, and they can be able to drain by gravity. So we feel that in addition to the sand and aggregate filtration, that plant growth is the answer to be able to help denutrify these runoff waters like from the tire water that we showed you there.
Yeah, if you introduce your contaminated water into the root zone, your plants do the final polishing. They absorb the phosphates, they absorb the nitrates, they absorb calcium, iron, magnesium. All these things become part of the plant structure, and that's your final destination point.
It's bioremediation. So we have aggregate filtration and bioremediation. So you'll notice the purple pipe, you can mix and blend different water sources to be used as irrigation because there's no human exposure, it's all subsurface. So in this case, for this large field, it could be a park, there's lots of applications. The pump that's in near the maintenance building pumps to the header pipe, then it's all by gravity from there. It's a laser level field, there's no crown. You can see the Nike swoosh on the players on the other side of the field, and it goes all the way across to a drain header on the other side where it then recirculates the flow subsurface. So here we are first charging the field as it comes across. You can see the capillary rise as it reaches the surface. We drill seeded Kentucky bluegrass. It germinated within about 8 days. Never been surface watered whatsoever. At 20 days, we had edge-to-edge germination, no hot spots, no wind pattern loss. It was perfect germination.
This was actually done in August in Sacramento.
By 45 days, we had 4 to 6 inch root growth and was ready for its first haircut. And by 90 days, it was ready for play from seed without ever surface watering. The field 7 years later is still quite playable, and some of the cost factors really came into play as well too. The water connection fees for a sprinkler irrigation would have been a 3-inch connection. In that area, the water connection fees were around $750,000. The water connection fee for EPIC is only 1 inch, which is only 50 grand. So we can literally pay for the fields themselves simply by reducing the water connection fees. Then in addition to the real estate savings by not needing storm ponds, a lot of money can be able to be saved for the client and offer that ROI right out of the gate.
And the reason it's so low, our demand rate for even a field is a flow rate for a pump of 12 gallons per minute per acre to provide irrigation. And that can be accomplished by a 1/2 horsepower pump. We don't need a lot of pressure, a lot of volume. We just do everything slowly. And we irrigate once a week, even when it's 100 degrees. We just recirculate the bottom reservoir.
Now, the field is located right here. You can be able to see it, still green. This is pictures taken 10 years later. The one adjoining is an artificial field. If they had chosen to, they could have used this for the base because we actually can help cool artificial surfaces using like a heat sink. Similar to how you can be able to hold a lighter underneath the paper cup and it won't burn the cup, it'll boil the water. The same principle of being able to help cool these athletic surfaces. But what interested me most with this picture is take notice of the sprinkled areas on the baseball fields. There's lots of wind pattern loss and hot temperatures on this hot hill above Sacramento. So we're able to save the school money, use efficient irrigation, reuse stormwater, and have a better quality turf. It's just a win-win-win for your clients. So when we apply this back to roadways, let's get back to drainage again. We just want to show you we can grow and bioremediate, but you can build a drain as well too. At Summit Fire, they were able to install this along the edge of their parking lot area, so the greenscape then becomes irrigated from the sheet flow from the parking area. This is Beckwith Veterinary Hospital in Modesto, California. It's a LEED Platinum installation that is entirely sustainable from stormwater. They actually capture all their stormwater that hits the parking lots, and instead of catch basins, which are 3 square feet of openings every several hundred linear feet, we have porous pavers, similar to what Bellegarde utilizes, and that equals over 20 square feet of openings in between the crack of these porous pavements. So we can capture directly at the edge, at the source, and then for this installation, that goes into a 300,000 gallon cistern located underneath the parking lot. They even, for geothermal heating and cooling, actually have radiator lines that go through the building and through
through the reservoir, because the reservoir is always at 60 degrees, so that they have a BTU exchange. We cool the coolant of the reservoir, it goes up and down the building walls, it cools the building, hot heat goes back to the reservoir and stabilizes 6 degrees, so what we call BTU exchange.
In addition to the management of the landscapes. Here just in our backyard, and if any of you want to go tour this after the presentation, we'd be happy to show you around the NDOT maintenance facility just outside. In this case, instead of sand, we use gravel. We lined the areas, had the epic chambers connected together around the perimeter of the maintenance yard. Then we put the porous open grid pavers on top. So here's the finished surface. Everything flows into the epic filters.
So no matter what activity you have, even with a 1-inch rain event, everything flows to the low end. At the low end is the filter. Look at the filter, it's not a puddle. The water simply disappeared through the gravel. It's a low absorption rate.
Yeah, you can see it, usually the sheet flow doesn't even make it across the whole filter. It's like a little triangle there, and that's doing most of the work, But if those ever get clogged by debris, they can then have many other pathways to be able to get to the final conveyance. This is up at SR 28, my inclined village. So you can be able to see on the right side of the sidewalk, those are private property infiltration ponds that were trying to accomplish the same method that we're doing on the left side of the sidewalk with the EPIC system, only we're able to do so much more because we're able to clean the water through that aggregate profile. We have a geo-fabric to allow sun infiltration, but if the geo-fabric fails, there's still a final out. We still can be able to connect to a header pipe and discharge that clean filtered water to the outfall on the other side of SR 28.
Yeah, what the structure, what we're showing is you can have variability in width. At NDOT yard, it was 4 feet. At Modesto, it was only 2 feet. It could be narrower. It really doesn't matter. The more area you have, the more filter capacity you have. This is 12 feet wide, so this is the access road. But the sidewalk is tilted. The parking lot is going to be tilted. Everything sheds onto this area where filtration occurs at the surface. Your pine needles from Lake Tahoe, cigarette butts, baby diapers are all going to be at the surface. We're only picking up the water, treating the water, and then going to the lake.
Well, and most importantly, NDOT was able to maximize the real estate use because it's a dual purpose. We're parking cars over what the detention basin would have been. And then everyone knows that oil floats, right? Less dense than water. Well, this is also a unique feature of the EPIC chamber is we have a passive oil-water separation that can be able to take place, and Jonas will explain how.
What's happened with oil molecules, the sheen that you're getting is a refractive thing of light. The molecule is only very thin, several molecules thick, so it's very thin, but it floats on top of the water. But this is the reality. Even at the NDOT yard, you can see this oil sheen on top of the water disappearing. Here we had more of a sheen that already starting a plugging action, so I'm traveling sideways to a non-plugging area. So in a sense, the EPIC, you get feedback.
That's when we were walking around.
Plugged section, it no longer infiltrates, but it goes to another section. So it tells you when it's time to clean, and cleaning might be as simple as just vacuuming or maybe 10, 20 years, you may want to replace the top 4 inches of gravel, but it's never going to affect the pipe. It's never going to plug at the pipe because it occurs at the surface.
The maintenance at the surface. We took these pictures when we were walking around with Z the last time we were down here at NDOT a few months ago, and we noticed some heavy equipment machinery is shedding a lot of oils, but it wasn't reaching the storm drain. That's the most important aspect. The filter is working and capturing it at the surface. And when it does make it down, it never really makes it into the discharge, into the stormwater system, due to the floating oils. They are at a higher connection. The connection to the chamber itself, the offset holes, is lower than the connection that goes to the final storm drain.
Yeah, so the yellow line here is on the aquarium is the red line. The earliest water can enter the chamber is at the top of the outside hole. But water accumulates up to this level, which is the invert of your 2-inch connector. So in drainage situations, my water's up to here, so oils coming down are not going to do a dive test under the water. They're going to coat the gravel in the same particles above it. So it's only water that's going in and not oil formations.
So it essentially becomes like a coral reef for biological activity, microbiological degradation that takes place.
In microbiology, oils, hydrocarbons, whether aliphatic or aromatic, you're really looking at carbon and hydrogen. If you give carbon and hydrogen exposed to an oxygen, and the natural bacteria that are present in the soil, Nitrosomonas, Nitrobacter, they have the ability to start using the hydrocarbons as a food source. The end product is H2O and CO2. This is the end product in chemistry. So the coral reef that you're creating is this infinite surface area of fine gravel and sand that gets a coating of molecules of oil. Bacteria attack the soil because everything is present. You have oxygen because it's very porous. You have moisture of some capillary rise.
Left over from the storm event.
From the gravel that gives you the moisture for bacteria to grow. So you provide all the ingredients naturally to induce decomposition. And this is what happens. Now, if you want to fine-tune it around an oil field, you can introduce bacteria that are more aggressive in oil decomposition. So you can sprinkle that in a profile. They'll survive for a time till natural organisms take over the business. But a lot of bacteria, again, hydrocarbons are just the food source.
And a lot of these bacteria exist in nature as well, too. So they'll naturally decompose and break down those hydrocarbons. So essentially, it kind of makes our filter a self-cleaning filter that only needs to be really maintained at the surface. And then snowmelt piles, they have another ideal application as well, too. We have some ideas for around Lake Tahoe, around ski resorts, and other different locations where, of course, after this record winter, snow has become a big issue. Where to put it? Where are we going to plow this stuff and put it?
This area on the left, NDOT yards, look at all after the snowmelt occurred and the heavy rains we had this winter. Everything was accumulated on top of this filter. Now, this is going to be picked up by a dozer if you want to, but the filter was not affected. This is the whole idea.
But just as equally as we can move water through the profile, we can also move air through the profile. And that's what we wanted to demonstrate here next. So imagine, if you will, if the filter had an air injection point, like a leaf blower or something simple for maintenance, so they can be able to move air through the profiles on a warmer spring day like this where it's above freezing. We can help be able to encourage to be able to melt those snow piles more effectively and filter that melting runoff using the system.
Yeah, what's nice about this sequence, this is all sand and it's just a vacuum blower, but you can see that even porosity of air, like an air hockey table coming in. Even where you're partially covered, you still have air infiltration under the plastic, but even this is directly to the air. And on the vacuum mode, you can use the tool as a vacuum. So if you have a dewatering situation of sludge, you place the sludge on top of sand, apply the vacuum, and the moisture gets drawn out through the profile. And you have a dewatering activity taking place. Again, basic physics of air and water movement.
So as you move forward and you go back to your design desks, instead of looking at straw wattles or perforated pipe or geo-fabrics, consider, if you will, a filter on the edge of your impervious surfaces. And that's really the philosophy that we're trying to portray here, is that we can be able to filter these edges with the EPIC system. That could either be a sand or gravel aggregate. And then the outflow from the EPIC system then can be able to go into supplemental storage. Well, what can we do with this water? This can then also be a larger chamber to be able to store water for reuse. Or you could be able to slowly siphon that off to another source so you have a volume available for the next storm that's coming in. But this is essentially the philosophical sequence that we're trying to promote and encourage you to utilize in your designs. Imagine, if you will, philosophically, let's just step away into a big picture. If we had these type of designs all across the state of Nevada, we're the driest state in the union, only 7 inches of rain a year. What could we possibly catch? It doesn't rain enough around here. Well, actually, if you do the math, the first inch of rainfall creates its first acre foot in the first mile. And we can be able to have an intercept capture of $100,000 that could be able to do both sides of the road just to do a test in that first mile and see if we can, in fact, capture that acre foot. If you wanted to capture it and reuse, it costs more, maybe up to $1 million a mile, but there's lots of different variations. But philosophically, we're actually missing out on 600,000 acre feet a year that fall on the roads in the state of Nevada. And right now just simply are lost to evaporation, maybe grow a sagebrush or two or something like that, some wildflowers. Imagine if we had that kind of volume available around the Lake Tahoe Basin for firefighting if a catastrophe happened in the Pine Tree area, or agriculture out by Fallon, or be able to siphon it into urban areas for reuse. being that this technology was developed, researched, and patented here in Nevada, why not have Nevada be the forefront in the nation of water management and water efficiency to be able to make that demonstration to the rest of the states of how we can be able to do it right in the desert. So when we get to the final reuse, what we're really just talking about in rural areas is just a 12-inch strip on the side of the road. It still can be within the line markers.
It could be a colored gravel if you want to delineate it. It could be the same gravel, it's just a fine gravel, but it's only 12 inches wide. Now what do we do with it? Eventually, it's not going to absorb all of it naturally. It's not going to go all in the ground, so you're going to need outlet points.
About every 100 feet is those red lines.
Because the road is higher, we can outlet and decide what to do with this excess water. It may just simply daylight. We may have capture and reuse. It may go to strategically placed reservoirs. It may do some agriculture. It may go a half a mile inland and feed a water trough for wildlife. So every time it rains, we're filling a wildlife trough.
Maybe near a deer crossing or something.
If we have reservoirs, we can have fighting reservoirs with risers along the road. We can suck out water.
Or even just a groundwater recharge. We could be able to have those recharge wells that we can then connect the road filtered water to.
Yeah, if you have wells and fractured rock zones that are really connecting, you're recharging then groundwater with filtered water. But water may just go to periodic trees, what we call an upflow filter, provide irrigation water passively, and you're just growing something further down the road.
In the Middle East, they did something similar in Abu Dhabi to where for a 30-mile stretch, I forget how many kilometers, they had trees along the side of the road. Now, they used drip irrigation in that case, but they could have used something like this. I mean, imagine if we had all through Washoe Valley some very wind-tolerant trees that could be along the side of the road, helping beautify the highway. It is feasible just to be able to do it sustainably off stormwater reuse. We've done the math, and when we ran the calculations, we can be able to keep up with 100-year events. And we can also calculate out the cost to be quite effective.
So a 1-inch rain is really fairly horrendous. A 1 inch per hour rain, that's a real big downpour. So 1-inch rain, 0.62 gallons per square foot, 2-inch outflow can do 20 gallons per minute. So I have to get rid of 1,200 gallons per hour. So I can really cover 1935 square feet. So an 18-foot wide road bed, 100 feet long, I just need one outfall to take care of that water movement mass.
That's the red lines that we're coming across.
So from the middle to here, I have 18 feet, so every 100 feet can be serviced by a 2-inch pipe. If you need a larger volume, you just need more 2-inch outlets. So that's your limiting factor, is that 20 gallons per minute. How much at the cost? Well, gravel, pipe, and everything. On a chamber, you're looking at $325 per square foot, per linear foot.
And a lot of the road improvements have been done. We got the lane markers, we got the rumble strips. Now we feel a road filter on the edge of the road is the next step, the 21st century feature, for our modern roadways.
So the mechanics, this is the 12-inch barrier, and this is the fine gravel, or it could be sand, or it could be coarse gravel. We're looking at it finely. Now, the liner options, you could have it with no liner, just have that installation. Whatever is absorbed below the surface will be absorbed, whatever passes on. You may have a EPDM liner if you a geo-fabric liner to separate the base from the surface. You can have a geo-fabric liner at the bottom if you wish, or you can contain the whole thing with EPDM liner so you have no water loss. And then once you put in the system, the filtration system, filtration occurs at the surface and you convey the water elsewhere. And what's nice about this blue line is your water level will never be higher than this invert. So if the system is below your subbase, you're never going to get water into the subbase, which will cause softening in the road. Because as soon as it hits here, it has an exit point. So all the quick percolation you have, path the least resistance to the chamber and then out.
So we remember the ditch video. What we propose is instead of ditches, we could be able to have a larger safe zone by expanding out, kind of like a runaway truck ramp on either side of the shoulder. Instead of ditches, we have that water conveyance, with the EPIC filtration and the optional storage that's available as well too. So we're doubling the safe zone essentially by eliminating the need for some of these ditches. The water harvesting, we're kind of reiterating all the fun aspects of what we believe could be able to happen. We understand that, right now in this time, probably filtering the roads is our first priority, but really do consider, maybe even for a test pilot somewhere as these projects come across your desk, you can do so much more with that water you capture, and we can really make a statement for the world. Even if there is such a catastrophe, Jonas actually has experience with a hazardous waste removal.
Well, when I worked for hazardous waste, when we had road spills, it became an expensive enterprise. A lot of this side material, sometimes the road, diesel dissolves the asphalt, all that stuff had to be removed and go all the way to Utah as a landfill. It became expensive, and then it has to be replaced. In this scenario, if you have a road spill and hazardous waste, especially what I read, you know exactly where it went to. And you can go to your riser and pump out the contaminant without affecting or digging anything, because you conveyed everything not through soil, you conveyed it to structures that you've created. And then you just suck out the contaminants and you're back in business.
We keep it at the surface. We're protecting the groundwater and the existing vegetation and soils. And it's a segmented system. They're epic cells, so they connect together. So you can be able to isolate which cells are contaminated and be able to treat them at that point. So
now, let's talk about cost, and they're all over the board, and you have your own figures off the internet. This is a 24-foot paved road, one sidewalk, one open ditch on side of the road, water sewer infrastructure, total cost $1,200 per linear foot, and this is broken down. So look at storm drain system, $198, curb and gutter, $55. You add those together, we're already spending $253 per linear foot on a simple road. Epic system does both. It does the storm drain and does the curb and gutter combined, and looking at $325 to $11 a foot. Less than 5% of what we're spending now. So we're not proposing we're going to be spending more money with new high-tech technology. We're making technology simpler and actually spending less money.
So we feel we're value engineering for your clients and for the image of your company and for the image of your organizations, that we can be able to do this more effectively, manage stormwater more efficiently, and be able to save the client money all out of the same picture. So that's really our presentation. This is our ending slide for your questions and answers and discussions. Essentially, what we promote is, instead of using the snowpack and using aqueduct systems or pumping from ground wells, there is a new water resource that's available from the efficient management of precipitation, not the movement of it. Yes, there in the back.
As you've observed, we don't get a whole lot of rainfall in Nevada.
Right.
I know that as a Nevada homeowner, it is illegal for me to use a rain barrel to capture dew.
Yeah, that is changing. Similar law was in Colorado. They redacted that in Colorado. There's a bill in
2009
legislature right now to eliminate that law. We talked with Jason King, the water master for Nevada. He's all for it because the science of recharge really isn't there. So this is kind of between. We're not a closed system per se. We are capturing and making the water more efficient before it goes to the ground. It defies logic. Let's say if I need 1,000 gallons for whatever purpose, doesn't it make more sense to capture it and take it off 3 feet below the ground than drill a 400-foot well to get my 1,000 gallons and use a lot of power to get that water to the surface, which is now contaminated with minerals, and I got to treat it? I'm still going to use 1,000 gallons. Does it really matter where it came from? So if I capture on these little geographic slivers of roads, I'm not affecting the natural infiltration or when it occurs in the mountains. I'm just using the water that I created on my surfaces. And if I'm using that water, I'm not using the groundwater. Leave the groundwater alone. We'll use it when we're really in deep, dire straits. Look what happened to California. NASA says California, the valley shrunk 2 inches. Why did it shrink 2 inches from NASA data? Because we pumped out all that water, your soil collapsed. Are we going to recover those void spaces? We're going to raise California by 2 inches? It's never going to happen. So using groundwater should be the very last resort.
And if you send us or leave us your email address, we'll be happy to forward you the latest legislation from the Nevada Assembly, where they are looking to allow capture on single residence home rooftops. So that's the beginning.
Well, but you started answering before I finished my question, but that's exactly where I was going. I know that there is a bill under consideration just down the street addressing exactly that point. My real question was, had this been vetted by Water Resources and whatever other appropriate folks here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we went and spoke with the state engineer, Jason King, and after speaking with him, he actually had us come back a second time so we can tell his whole staff. So he's very excited with the concepts and the logic of being able to capture and reuse water from impervious surfaces. It's really just a hydrological responsibility of humans being responsible for the water that falls on what we build. You know, what happens in nature, we're still going to recharge in the mountains, and that's going to occur, but what hits our rooftops and our roads and our parking lots, we should manage effectively. Yes, in the middle.
Along those lines, I guess, is the ownership of water along whose property it is, who installs the system, and someone need to apply for water rights?
That'll be for the legislature to determine, but in my humble opinion, I think if it falls on a government road, it's the government's responsibility. If it falls on a private property, it's their water. So it's
a philosophy. Who owns the rainwater? Does California own the water because it comes across the Sierras?
Does Japan own it because it evaporated from the ocean closer to them? And then
well, to give you an example, last February we had a 2-inch rain in Truckee Meadows. It's 100 square miles of hardscape. All we did, we contaminated that water, went to Pyramid Lake. Technically, it may have raised Pyramid Lake 3/4 of an inch, but that water evaporated in 4 days, formed clouds, went to Massachusetts, and dumped 7 inches of rain. And we call this water management. It doesn't make any sense. Once it's at Pyramid Lake, you're not going to get it back. It's going to evaporate. Lake Mead evaporates 80 inches during a year. That's 326 billion gallons of water going to the atmosphere. That's science. You're not going to do it. You're not put plastic over Lake Mead to prevent evaporation. But if I have underground reservoir systems, there is no evaporation, there is no algae growth because it's underground. I can store that water forever. And it's very clean, and then I retrieve it when I need it.
That's why we're labeling this as a new water resource. We're capturing and storing, filtering and storing water that otherwise would have been lost to evaporation. When Colorado redacted that law in 2009, their conservation district or something, I forget the acronym, they did a study, they found that 97% of the water that falls upon surfaces either is lost to evaporation or goes to native plants. Only 3% would maybe make it to watersheds in the Colorado River. And so reusing the water that falls upon us, we feel is the most effective means to add to our infrastructure, to have smart engineering for the future.
What's frequently unknown in physics, 1 inch of water in sand will wet the profile 10 inches. But that water is locked up now. It doesn't move any further down by gravity. It's just evaporating. So if you have a 10-foot column in front of the legislative building and you have a yearly rain event, you're never going to see water at the bottom of the column because it evaporates before it really moves down. That's just...
And your question's more about who owns the water. I mean, I know there's water credits that they give in Las Vegas, to where they give you a credit to put the water up to Lake Mead.
Well,
and one example that Dad's used is
like Lake Mead is 1,000 feet lower than Las Vegas. Their philosophy is we're going to dump all the water into Lake Mead so we can get credit. We dump 1 million gallons, we can withdraw 1 million gallons of water. Well, what you're saying is I have a gallon of water, I'm going to go in August and pour it on my driveway and come back a week later and retrieve it. It doesn't happen. The water you've just dumped in Lake Mead, which is a pizza oven, is not going to be there to retrieve. It might be on paper, but physically it's not going to be there. So is that how we control water management? That's not reality.
Who do you think?
I'm only here as a devil's advocate.
Yeah, please.
So what are you going to do when our neighbors to the downwind from us start suing us for capturing the water that they would naturally plan as rainfall?
Well, Jason King had mentioned, the state engineer had mentioned that this, of course, would be a delicate issue that we take, project per project, and it's a slow process. We've been doing this for over 20 years. We're excited to do it right now, but we do want to be able to make sure that there is no adverse effects to adjacent basins and folks downstream. But you have to admit that from some of our current techniques and like the tire tread issue that we're introducing, simply filtering the water first from the roadways really is a priority. We really need to be hydrologically responsible for the water that we are shedding to the watersheds. Then down the road we can tackle that philosophical issue of capture and use and storing it. But it is actually mandated in Los Angeles right now. If you look at pages 46 to 47 of their LID Stormbook manual, it's the new version for their SUSUMP regulations, that this type of technology is mandated to be used. They have to get a permit to demonstrate that they are capturing and saving the first inch of every rainfall event and reusing it on site. So these type of systems are utilized for all the landscape. All the roof downspouts are going to all their planters and then be able to reuse. And they have storage underneath that's being reused. So it's my opinion that that type of philosophy will spread across the country, but time will tell, and we'll see as each state decides their stance.
But each state can do the same thing. We're in a drier state. If I go to California with a 15-inch climate, I have no problem getting all the water they need. Every landscape project in California can be done and maintained by rainwater alone. We did a 12-acre project in Cambria, California. We're irrigating 130,000 square feet of turf. That site has no runoff and needs no water. We simply store 1.7 million gallons underneath the soccer field and retrieve it when we need it. That site is self-sustainable and rainwater alone. Does it affect the rest of the California? Does Utah get less water because of it? I doubt it.
It's similar to storage conveyances like this. So this is a different company. There's StormTech, there's ADS, there's many different. This is Triton from the Midwest. But basically the system exists above large void space containment like this that we line. You had a question, sir.
Well, I was going to say, I think that we can talk about all sorts of rules and laws, but I think the big point is we're having a water quality issue coming off our roadways.
Yes.
Yep. And I think you have to fix that problem first before we can start fighting over the gallon of water we just treated.
Right, and then the benefit is, by addressing the water quality issue and having the filter in place, now we have the infrastructure. Once we figure out, who owns the water, then we can simply plug into it and line it if we choose to, But the filtering, that's the key. That's, I think, our current focus, our current drive.
I just want to make a comment on that. I've been involved with the Truckee River Watershed Group, Washoe County, City of Reno, Low Impact Development Manuals, and putting the water storage issue to the side. What we do have to focus on is, you're spot on, we need to control the quality of water that's entering our watershed. We need to cool the water, and this is an ideal system for presenting really good solutions on that front. And that's really a key where I can see this being implemented. This is the technology that we, as the paver industry, we've been talking about this now for probably 10, 15 years. We've seen huge growths in that segment of our business. But, just to the gentleman's point, if we don't worry about the capturing right now, let's worry about how we're going to treat it before it hits Truckee River, before it hits the Carson River, before it hits, Humboldt. Right. Those are all real critical issues.
Well, and if we tried the same design that we mentioned, with perforated pipe, the evil perforated pipe, this is only 2.4 inches of these little 2mm slits per linear foot, where the Epic chamber has 10 to 12 inches of interface holes per linear foot. So we can accomplish so much more water movement through this non-clogging apparatus. That's why it's all based around the offset holes. We can have contact with these subsurface matrices, but the water can be able to pass into or out of the chamber at will. And so that's the difference, to where whenever you see this in your plans, consider replacing it with this. That's really all we're saying to get started and as we move forward. Any other questions? How is the food? I'm starving. You're welcome.
If anybody would like to take a tour to the maintenance yard, we're going to go after this. Thank you, Jonas and Tom. This is Awesome.
Thank you, Z. Yeah, much appreciated.
No problem. Thank you for lunch.
Thank you.
Next meeting, we have our Stormwater Division here in NDOT presenting. So Tyler, Du, and Zachary will be presenting, so we'll see you guys over there.
Okay.